Hello, good afternoon, and good morning to some. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Minority Business Development Agency's Enterprising Women of Color Virtual Opportunities Brown Bag in partnership with the Walt Disney Company. I wanted to be festive today, so I gave a shout out to our friend Mickey. Hey, we would like to welcome our 5 enterprising women of color business centers and their clients who are on this call today. Operation Hope, WeBank South, MP Services, Washington Area Community Investment Fund, and YWCA Oahu. For those unfamiliar with the Enterprising Women of Color Initiative and its programming, we customize and curate content to provide the development and growth of women of color MBEs. We provide access to increased opportunity for partnership development, and we build strong coalitions for women of color. Again, I want to thank you so much for joining us and being a very big part of our EWOC family. I'd now like to turn it over to our acting national director, Ms. Edith McLeod.
Thank you for joining the Minority Business Development Agency's Enterprising Women of Color virtual forum in collaboration with the Disney Corporation. Today, we are excited to talk to our supplier diversity partners at Disney. Now, we all know that Disney is a household name across the globe, but today we will get an inside look at what it takes to actually do business with them. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the newest members of our national network of business centers, the first ever MBDA Enterprising Women of Color Business Centers. MBDA's Women of Color initiative originally launched as a pilot program a few years ago, but it didn't take long for us to realize that the scaling of this program was a very necessary and important investment. We know that within the last 5 years, women-owned businesses grew 21%, while firms owned by women of color grew at double the rate, at 42%. The proof is literally in the data. We know, again, that women grow rapidly in this profession because of their innate ability to do the right thing at the right time for the right people. So thank you again to our inaugural 5 Enterprising Women of Color Centers for agreeing to partner with us over the next several years to help women of color businesses grow in size and scale. Also, thank you to the clients of these centers for joining us today. Lastly, I would like to thank Disney for agreeing to share insights about your procurement program. The timing could not be better, and the topic of business opportunity is always a great conversation. Now I'll turn it over to Carla and our niece. Thank you very much.
So before we are joined by Carla and our niece, I'd just like to give a very brief introduction to both of those ladies. Now, I met Carla a year ago, a little over a year ago, when we took EWOC on the road to Orlando. We had such a great time learning about not only access to capital and marketing, but the various different aspects of business growth for women of color in Orlando with our gracious host, the Walt Disney Corporation. And we are just delighted to have both Carla and our niece here with us today to give us a little sneak peek into what it takes to be a Disney supplier. Carla is a manager of supplier diversity supporting the Disney's theme park and resorts for East Coast operations, including design and construction, facilities asset management, facilities operations and services, the Walt Disney Imagineers, and food and beverage. That is a lot. Since 2007, Carla has collaborated with these assigned category teams and key functional stakeholders to develop strategies designed to increase the utilization of diverse suppliers. Ms. Arnice Lamb is Manager of Supplier Diversity and supports the Enterprise Construction and Professional Services categories, as well as the Walt Disney Parks Resort segment. She has been with the company since February of 1991. For several years, Mrs. Lamb has been instrumental in the development and implementation and compliance of Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program. A big EWOC welcome to both Carla and Arnice. Carla?
Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you for the opportunity to present a little about the Disney magic within supplier diversity. And we are excited. As Jatheda mentioned, we had the opportunity to work a little over a year ago when they came to Walt Disney, and that was an event that really opened our eyes and just showed how important it is as far as working with EWOC moving forward. So we are very excited about this continuing opportunity to expand our relationship. Next slide. And one thing that you'll notice on the slide, www.supplierdiversity.disney.com. So if there's anything that I might mention and you're like, hey, I just want to learn a little bit more about the Walt Disney Company's program, if you go to www.supplierdiversity.disney.com, then you'll be able to read up more on the programs that we have in that area. And then it'll also provide you a link to our portal where you can go in and register if you read up and say, hey, this is something that I want to pursue in the future. Now, when you think about supplier diversity and the Walt Disney Company, we focus on the following mission. And our mission is to identify, develop, and connect the best that the diverse marketplace has to offer to Disney. And that aligns with our vision of supplier diversity as a trusted strategic partner to our clients, colleagues, and the diverse marketplace. So it definitely is a collaboration when we're working together as a whole. And when we're in the marketplace and working with our stakeholders as well as our category sourcing managers, we find out what the needs are, and then we also find out not only what the needs are, but we really enjoy going out to the marketplace to find out what the capabilities are, and even bringing back capabilities, innovation that some of our category sourcing teams might not have considered, but just based on these various engagements that we have with the MBDA, as well as the NMSDC and WeBank, to name a few, this gives us the exposure to be able to showcase the talent that we have to offer in our communities. Now, you'll see underneath, it talks about contribute to profitability, driving innovation, and protecting the brand. And one thing, if you know anything about Disney, we definitely want to make sure that we're protecting our brand. And when we are engaging in relationships with our various suppliers, we want to make sure that the suppliers have the same objectives that we have, as well as the same values and visions that we have. So then that way we have that collaborative partnership. And you can't have a business without having the knack for being able to be profitable. And that's one thing that we want to make sure is a win-win for both sides. So when you're looking to the left and it talks about profitability, we look at increasing the number of qualified diverse suppliers, as well as growing tier 2. Now, we do know that we are a large corporation, and when you look at tier 2 suppliers are suppliers that provide a product to primes. So say, for example, I came from automotive, so I always use an automotive example. But if you have a tire, you might have a tire and it has a plug. And that plug on that tire is a very integral part of that tire. And you might have someone that's producing that plug. And that plug would be produced by a tier 2 supplier. And that's why we always like to educate as far as when you're looking at larger corporations, not only looking at those larger prime one opportunities, but looking at, hey, how can I get in the door for those tier 2 supplier opportunities? Because once you're able to be familiarized, if it's with Disney or any other corporation, you're wanting to learn the culture. And the best way to learn the culture is when you're going in and looking at tier 2 opportunities, so then that way you can understand policies and procedures and then work hand in hand with another organization to make sure that you're honing in on your various skills and capabilities to provide that innovation that we're looking for as an organization. And we also want to make sure we're developing diverse suppliers through engagements, as I mentioned, as well as mentoring programs, as in addition to our SRM programs, which are, we have responsibility to make sure when you're looking at the SRM that you're looking at what is something that's sustaining your business. So when you're looking at those opportunities for SRM, how can we grow? We have quarterly as well as annually meetings with our suppliers to find out where that innovation is coming from. What have they been doing in order to grow their business, and having that opportunity to collaborate and work one-on-one through those supplier relationship management engagements. Then you look at driving innovation. When you look at innovation, I think one thing that COVID-19 has taught everyone is the importance of pivoting your business and the importance of looking at how you previously ran your business, but just based on the current climate, what can you do in order to continue to sustain your business? And that's one thing when we're looking at innovative opportunities, having that collaboration once again to see what is something that you can bring to the table to help us be more efficient on our end. And then once again, I have to speak on protecting and enhancing the brand once again. One thing when you look at Disney or think about Disney, we are a storytelling organization. And not only are we a storytelling organization, we know that each of the diverse businesses that come and work with Disney, they have a story as well too. So throughout these engagements, we want to make sure that we find out about your stories, so then that way we can help you to grow your legacy and your brand on your end. Next slide. And you might ask, well, how do we do this? And how this is done is by making sure we are looking at our diverse supplier base and making sure that it creates value. And when it's creating value, you hear the terms, not only with Disney, but other corporations, it's just brand loyalty. We know for a fact that 82% of diverse suppliers are more likely to buy from companies that have supplier diversity programs. And in light of just currently right now with a civil unrest that's going on in the country, one thing that supplier diversity is definitely getting noticed, and just how important it is, not that it's just getting noticed as far as just based on the activities of what happened this past summer and even before that, but as far as just looking at what we've already brought to the table and what we want to do to make sure that we're going to the next level in supplier diversity, and especially making sure that now organizations or companies or corporations that might not have been familiar with diversity programs, now they're having that opportunity to be able to learn and engage, and we want to make sure that we are definitely showcasing the talent. And we spoke on innovation, local sourcing. Our supplier diversity team is located within our supplier diversity team is located, within our strategic sourcing department. So when we are normally in the office, we are on the same floor, so it gives that opportunity for us to engage with our sourcing specialists as well as our category sourcing managers to find out what their needs are. And finding out their needs in advance So then that way we can make sure when we are going to different engagements, we are representing not only our category sourcing managers, but also making sure that we're bringing the right needs to the marketplace. And it's no secret when we're looking at just the creates value, we want to make sure we're increasing competition. Myself, as well as our niece Lamb, we both started in contracts as well as in our buying organization. And it goes without saying, when you have a lot of buyers that you're interacting with and the buyers are interacting with the stakeholders, a lot of times you would love to say, hey, we're going to pre-plan and we got 6 months to work on this project. That's a unique situation, an ideal situation. But just based on the demand and the need, realistically, it might be a week. And they're just saying, hey, you know what? This RFP, which is a request for proposal, is coming out within the next week. Here's our scope. Do you have any diverse suppliers? And that's one thing that myself and our niece, we and the rest of our team, we make sure that before we get to those kind of dialogues, that we are making sure that we're proactive and making sure that that website that I initially mentioned, that our diverse suppliers are going in and they're uploading their profiles, they're providing their capability statements, and they're showcasing what are their niche areas that they have to offer. So then that way, when we are having those conversations with our category sourcing managers and they're asking us a need, it feels really good when you can tell them, hey, go to our portal and boom, the supplier that you're looking for is right there. And the information is complete. All the sales of the organization is present. Their current suppliers that they've worked with in the past, even their PowerPoint presentations that tell a little bit more about their organization. All of that is showcased in that one portal. And I know a lot of times being a diverse business, you kind of get angst when people tell you, hey, go to our portal. And you wonder, is it a black hole? Does anyone actually look at that? And we definitely do look at our portal at the Walt Disney Company because we use that portal to track your journey. So when you are having engagements with myself or our niece or for the other members of our team, we are documenting, hey, where we met you at. We're documenting as far as like, hey, you've gone on, you completed the profile. Now it's, resting with the sourcing specialist for review. So then that way, if it's either I'm on the East Coast in Florida or our niece is on the West Coast in California, she can go into that portal and see what that journey looks like. And then market insights. We definitely listen to the marketplace. Are there needs? What's going on? What are some challenges that you had? Because a lot of times when you work with larger corporations, it's difficult when you meet one person, and then when you meet that one person, then all of a sudden they go off to another job assignment. And then you're like, oh, I have to reestablish a relationship. That's why it's so important from a supplier diversity standpoint that we want to make sure the introductions are done through our team. So then that way you have that path once again of your journey. And then just broader supply chain, we want to make sure we're reducing the risk of the supply chain, any interruptions through a wider supply base. And once again, as COVID definitely has showcased to the world just how important the supply chain is and how important it is to make sure that you are communicating and engaging with all your different partners to make sure that supply chain continues. And then increased exposure. We want to make sure that potential customer base through additional exposure within our underserved communities. So when we are looking at diverse business enterprises, we are committed to being your advocate and showcasing how important it is to make sure that our stakeholders as well as our sourcing specialists are utilizing the sources that we have to give you those opportunities to be able to compete. Next slide. Now, I mentioned the term collaboration. Now, when you're collaborating, how do we work and what do we do? And this is how that collaboration is done. One thing I love about this slide, it talks about development, engagement, measurement, and impact. And one thing, regardless of if it's the Walt Disney Company, if it's Coca-Cola, whoever the organization is that you're trying to pursue, one consistent theme you're going to hear is patience. It doesn't happen overnight. So when I mentioned earlier that sometimes you might want to look at those larger opportunities and you might not be in that size to supply the needs for that tier one, but you might be able to supply the needs in that tier two space. And one thing that myself and our niece, we really make sure that we do, if all of a sudden we are communicating on a regular basis with our supply chain folks, in addition to our category sourcing managers, we'll get an idea of the bid opportunities and when that contract is up and when it's due up for renewal. So say, for example, one area that we have a lot of interest in a lot of time is professional services. And professional services, that's a tapped resource. However, what we like to tell folks is like, hey, if that contract isn't up for till 2023, that we want to make sure that you're looking at increasing your bidding muscles. So if there's other opportunities that you're engaging with somebody in the space of hospitality or another entertainment provider, if you're engaging with someone from Universal, at the time that you meet us, you might not have had that experience. But based on the importance of establishing those relationships and finding a little bit more out about each of your organizations and finding out that you're developing your bidding muscles, that's one thing that helps grow. So then that way, when that need arises, and then we realize, hey, we met you at a WeBank event, or we met you at an event such as the event that you're at today, and we realize that, hey, at that point, you might not have had experience in a particular area, but during the last 2, 3, 4 years that you've had opportunities to be able to develop. So that's one thing that's really important. And that's where we're looking at scholarship opportunities that are offered by organizations such as this one, and as well as NMSDC, and mentoring programs to help you develop. Next, we want to look at engagement. Engagement is so important when we make sure that we are engaging with the various organizations that I mentioned. And then you'll see the organizations also that we work with that's at the bottom of the slide. When you look at NMSDC, as I mentioned before, you look at NGLCC, We Connect, WeBank, Novova, and VDC, as well as Disability In. All of those engagements that we work with, and we do matchmaking sessions, or we go to conferences, making sure that we're getting those opportunities to meet our diverse suppliers to provide to our stakeholders and category sourcing managers. And measurement is really important. And I know that from a business standpoint, you always have to see what's going on with your P&L. You're always checking to see as far as like what your balance sheet's looking like. And from a supplier diversity standpoint, we want to see what our diverse spend is. We want to see that engagement. We want to see, how are we increasing our engagement? Where are some areas of opportunity in construction? Or there might be opportunities in the marketing and advertising space or production. Those areas that we're looking at, hey, we might be underrepresentation in those areas, and we want to make sure, just based on looking at measurements, how can we increase that moving forward so then that way we can gain that diverse representation. And then lastly, just the impact on economic impact on the community. That's one thing from an education standpoint, internally and externally, that we always make sure that we're communicating, making sure that we're looking at in fiscal year 18, we know that diverse suppliers at Disney created $1.1 billion in economic impact. And this supported nationwide over 7,700 jobs. So when we're looking at opportunities for growth, we're not only looking at growth from the supplier base, but just looking at as far as just that involvement and that inclusiveness to make sure that we are truly impacting our communities. And more importantly, when we have individuals come to our parks, we want to make sure our supply chain base looks like our guests that come to our parks as well. And when we talk about collaboration, it's not only diversity and inclusion, it's corporate citizenship, government relations, Disney Institute, strategic sourcing, which I mentioned before, and our business unit stakeholders, and just our community partners and overall our customers and guests. This is one thing that's a joint representation of all of us collectively working together to make sure that we're influencing and making sure the next generation and generations to come do have that diverse look. And one thing from a certification and advocacy agency, one thing when we're looking at measurements and measurable, and I will get to this in a later slide, but some of the businesses on the line might have heard of the $1 Billion Roundtable. And with the $1 Billion Roundtable, also known as BDR, they focus on making sure that corporations are spending $1 billion or more. And when they're looking at corporations spending $1 billion or more, their commitment to making sure that the suppliers that are being represented are certified. And so when you're looking at certification, these agencies that are represented on these screens, these are in fact the footprint of the organizations based on their certification of site visits to make sure that if you're representing disability in, you are meeting the disability criteria to be certified in that area. In VBDC, Novoba, making sure if you're a veteran organization that you are making sure that you're certified through those site visits that you are a veteran-owned organization. Same with WeBank and WeConnect as well. And then when you look at NGLCC for the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, they also are following the same guidelines of making sure, looking at financials, doing site visits to make sure that that representation is truly being accomplished. But when we are looking at, and that's once again for the $1 Billion Roundtable, but when we're looking at our spend in general, one thing that we realized from the Walt Disney Company standpoint, we were leaving a lot of funds on the table. So there are regional organizations that we work with, i.e., I live in Orlando. So the city of Orlando, the state of Florida, the Department of Transportation, they also have certifying programs to make sure that businesses are in fact certified and being represented. One thing that I must stress, some organizations look at self-certifying. We do not look at self-certification from a Walt Disney Company standpoint, and neither does $1 Billion Roundtable. So that's why it's so important to make sure that, hey, initially you might say, hey, I'm still growing my business and I do have a relationship with my organization within the city or the state, and hey, I do have a certification from that standpoint. That's great. However, making sure that you're looking at other opportunities of these certification agencies that are represented when you are looking at larger opportunities that you might be pursuing. Next slide. And one thing that we are excited about is providing this level of education. When myself and our niece, when we were meeting, preparing for this presentation, we wanted to make sure to share golden nuggets with you, however, making sure that there's still enough time to allot for discussions. So once again, I'm going to breeze past this $1 Billion Roundtable slide, but this just gives you an idea of the individuals that are currently a part of $1 Billion Roundtable and their commitment to diverse suppliers. So it might be someone on this slide that you're like, hey, you know what? I have a direct relationship already with CVS Health or Walmart or Kroger, and just wanted to make sure to let you know that those individuals are a part of the $1 Billion Roundtable. And we strive to be a part of the $1 Billion Roundtable, and that's one thing that we're constantly increasing our spend in the diverse space, so then that way we can have representation on this slide. And our goal is looking at 2024 that we actually want to make sure that we are a part of the $1 Billion Roundtable, not with just 1 billion once, but also make sure that we're sustaining that 1 billion moving forward. Next slide. And I know I said a mouthful, but one summary that I wanted to make sure to indicate, these are the items in order to make sure supplier diversity is effective. We want to make sure that we're measuring in several ways. We talked about the dollars spent with diverse suppliers within the company. And then we also talked about tier 2 relationships and number and dollar of contracts awarded to diverse vendors. That's one thing that from this fiscal year that we're looking at making sure that we're having those continual conversations with our sourcing professionals to find out, hey, what contracts are expiring, making sure that we are proactive as opposed to reactive. So then that way, as I mentioned, we're sharing those resources of those suppliers that can participate in those bids that might be coming up 3 months from now or 6 months from now. And then lastly, it depends on the space that you're in, but when you're in the construction space, one thing that we're looking at is making sure that we're having language that's in the supplier contracts that indicate, hey, what is our percentage of contract that goes to diverse subcontractors? And looking at if it's 10% that we want to make sure that we're utilizing from a contract standpoint in construction. So say, for example, if you have $1 million contract, and in that $1 million contract, you commit, hey, I'm going to have 10% of subs. So that 10% of subs, that might be plumbing, electrical, and you might say 5% is going to go to plumbing, and then the other 5% is going to be electrical. And if you committed to 100,000, we want to make sure that we're tracking if that project is a 6-month project, doing that pulse check to make sure prior to that project being concluded that you are making that commitment. Next slide. And you probably are thinking, how does it look from a sourcing standpoint? So as I mentioned, supplier diversity is integrated into sourcing. And when you look at sourcing activities, you might wonder, like, how do they do all the sourcing that they do? And when you look at the Walt Disney Company, the thing that makes us more unique is the fact that you can have somebody that's looking at sourcing opportunities for a MRO part, to a bus, to advertising, to a hot dog, to a turkey leg cannot represent theme parks and resort and not bring up the big turkey legs. You have a lot of different commodities that our sourcing team is responsible for managing, anywhere from furniture, fixture, and equipment to food and beverage, as I mentioned, to construction services, to MRO, engineering services. So you have a lot of areas that are represented, technology, that make up the whole of the Walt Disney Company. So when you're looking at all of those different type of commodities, they have to have a project plan. They have to analyze and have a strategy. Supplier evaluations and selection, that's a part of the whole RFP bidding process. And before you even get to that RFP bidding process, they have to do market analysis to see what the needs are, what the business unit requirements are, and then negotiating agreements. Once you get to that RFP process, making sure that you have that short list of seeing, okay, we might have bid to 10 firms. Out of the 10, and based on the scope of services, we narrowed it down to 5. And then going through and making sure that those 5 are able to deliver quality time services based on the needs of that particular bid opportunity. And then implementation, making sure that we're checking and charting the performance, not only for diverse suppliers, but just our suppliers as a whole, to make sure that we are having that partnership that's protecting our brand as well as protecting the brand of the supplier as well. And when you see the bottom representation, it shows supplier diversity and how we identify opportunities within this process, this sourcing strategy, how we assess the scope, making sure that we're proactive as opposed to reactive. In the past, it's very easy to be reactive when people are like, hey, do you have a supplier? But the fact that we're trying to be proactive and making sure through our engagements that we are building our supplier database by making sure that we have those resources available when those needs arise. Making sure that RFP inclusion is done, as I mentioned, and then setting a framework under that negotiation piece of second tier reporting on supplier diversity metrics. So when we're looking at our portal has 2 purposes, not only for the diverse suppliers to go in and to log in their information so we can stay in contact, but they also make sure that when we're looking at tier 2 responsibilities, that we're measuring that tier 2 responsibility. and seeing how that performance is leveling up. And one thing before we leave this slide, and we talked about SRM with diverse suppliers, which is making sure that we have that supplier relationship management with all our suppliers, so then that way they are providing innovation as well as that type of next level of where they're trying to take their organization to make sure that we're in line. But when I talk about the portal, want to make sure that I'm clear. We have our supplier diversity portal, but once you go through this RFP process and you're selected to be a supplier based on winning that award, at that point is when you get a vendor code. So a lot of times when we talk this, since myself and our niece have been a part of supplier and supplier diversity, in addition to sourcing, we know the importance of making sure to level set expectations. So just because you go into the portal and complete the portal doesn't guarantee work. We still have to make sure that the work is based on the needs as well as the RFP process that's completed. So then that way, once that's completed, and you receive an award, then at that point, then that's when the next process of vendor generation of a supplier code is completed. Next step, next slide. And one thing, which is our last slide, wanted to talk on meet the team. Our team is led by our director, which is Leonard Spencer. He's responsible for the overall strategy of our supplier diversity team. Then we have myself and our niece Lamb, and our bios were mentioned a little earlier. And our other team members that we want to make sure to bring to your attention is Ben Tubo. Ben is responsible for supporting all of studio entertainment. Anything tied to film production in California, he's housed in that Glendale, Burbank area. Ankit Brahmshantri, he's responsible for media networks as well as technology. And he's responsible for, and our analytics as well. He's also in Burbank and Glendale, and he's responsible for, making sure anything that's happening with media networks, from the ESPN standpoint, even some professional services might fall into his area. That's all handled by Ankit Brahmshantri. And then last but not least, we have Dan Gremvik. He is the manager responsible for sustainability. So sustainability is another arm that's a part of our charge of making sure that we are having diversity as well as from an environmentality standpoint that we are sustaining. Next slide. And once again, wanted to end with this slide, supplierdiversity.disney.com, to make sure that you're going onto that and learning more about our supplier diversity program. And with that being said, I will stop. And my colleague, Arnice, she is on the phone to see if she had anything to add to the presentation before we open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla. Just wanted to provide a little clarification because I noticed there are a couple of questions that are out there. So with regards to what is Disney's preference, the certification that Ms. McKinney had indicated to you, which is the National Minority Supplier Development Council, the U.S. Pan-Asian Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the NGLCC, the Women Business Enterprise National Council, and their sister division that is international, which is called We Connect. For veterans, it would be NAVOBA, as well as their sister division, NVBDC, and Disability In. Those are the agencies of preference. However, we do look at certifications by third-party certification agencies that do on-site visits to validate that the firm is, in fact, a certified diverse firm. And so, I just wanted to provide that point of clarification. So we do not accept self-certification. So whatever agency that you are providing, if that agency is not doing on-site visits to validate your certification, that certification would not be accepted at Disney.
Thank you for that, Arnice, for making that clarification, because that's so important. Because we've lately, we've come up with, hey, do you self-certify? And just trying to make sure that that is something that's clearly articulated, that, we do not self-certify. And to Arnice's point, that's why it's so important engaging with those third-party agencies that go in and do that self-certifying. To go in and do that certification through those site visits. That's one thing that's really important, because anyone can say, hey, I'm a veteran-owned business, but then when you actually go through and actually do the legwork and provide the financials and just go through that whole process, that truly makes sure that you're truly being represented. And that's one thing that's really important, that we want to make sure that when we are engaging with those certified suppliers, that they are truly certified in those areas that they're specifying. And then I see that Jafeda just sent a message like, please indicate any questions that you might have in the chat. And one question was like, can we have your contact information? Yes, I will put my email as well as Arnice's email in the chat. But one thing I want to make sure that I also will put in the chat, it's great connecting with myself as well as Arnice, but one thing that we're going to ask you, hey, have you gone on to our portal? So it's very poignant that it's listed on the slide right now, as far as making sure that you're going into our supplier diversity portal to make sure that you're going in. And it's www.supplierdiversity.disney.com. I know it's HTTPS here, but if you go to www.supplierdiversity, because once you go there, then there's another link that takes you to the actual portal where you'll go in and actually complete information on your organization. And you definitely might want to make sure that you're taking breaks, because it's something that you're probably not going to fill out in one setting. So make sure that you are making sure that you're going in and having some quality time when you're actually putting that information in, because we definitely realize that it might be a little detailed and a little cumbersome, but it helps showcase, and that's kind of your resume and exposure to us, showing and showcasing what your company is capable of.
So one of the questions that was brought up was, what if you are a sole proprietor? It says sole, but I'm assuming sole proprietor. So if you are a sole proprietor, you're still going to need to get certified. And so what my recommendation to you is to look at the site contingent if you are a woman-owned business, an ethnic minority-owned business, a veteran-owned business, to check those sites. And the sites, each and every one of them, will provide you with a criteria that is required to be certified. And yes, all of these certification agencies do certify sole proprietors.
And Arnice, one of the questions in the chat that I also see is the SAM Gov certification acceptable?
No, because the SAM Gov certification is self-certification. That is not acceptable. I also received a question as it relates to what about today's COVID? NMSCC and WeBank are doing online visitation. Are you accepting that? If the certification agencies that you refer to, they will be doing and leveraging and using Zoom, to do their site visits. So whatever the criteria or protocol that those certification organizations are using, those the same is what we will accept as well. Another question that was brought up, do you have a list of routine products you source? We source pretty much everything that you could think of under the sun to operate your business. We don't have a list of routine products because we cover a variety. But what we encourage you to do is to clearly articulate what is the product or services that you provide, and we in turn will do our due diligence to determine when that category will be out the marketplace and give you some insight of what is required.
And I think one thing is really important to mention too, Arnice. I know everyone watches the news, and obviously the hospitality industry has been hit really hard. And we are definitely still trying to come back as far as from that. And we know Disneyland is still in the process of opening. World is open, but then we also have 3 other parks as far as in China that are closed. And one thing that's really important as far as just that we're realizing, especially in the construction space, the importance of sustainability. So when you look at, it's funny, I heard someone say that this in a meeting that I was attending. Sometimes you have those projects that I'm like, everyone thinks are those attractive projects and they're glamorous projects. But then when you're thinking about what's actually keeping something running and going, i.e. if it's in that plumbing space or if it's in that electrical space, those are things and projects that are a part of like capital programs that still have to maintain the park. And when we're looking at celebrating 50 years, Disneyland has celebrated 60 years, but next year we're in the process of celebrating in World our 50-year anniversary, looking at as far as just that preparation, getting ready for that. But one thing that I think is really important, and I think a lot of business owners can definitely relate to this, you had a decrease in your staff. So when you have a decrease in your staff due to COVID, you're having increased responsibilities with less manpower. So that's one thing that I think is a consistent theme with larger organizations as well as with smaller organizations as well too. So when we're saying, the importance of patience, then the importance of pivoting, we're looking at how we're pivoting our business model as well too. So when you're looking at, hey, what can I do? What can I do as far as like making sure that I'm strengthening my business? That's something that you can have that woman, man in the mirror moment of, hey, what do I do well? And what are some offerings that I can bring to organizations? So that's one thing that's really important. Not seeing what a larger organization can do for you, but what you can bring to that larger organization to make sure that we are creating that innovation. What we're doing as far as making sure that we're sustaining, resources. What's something that you bring into the table that, hey, that aha moment that can help our lodging operations, our, food and beverage operations, those different operations that are still working, but what can you bring from that innovative standpoint?
Hi, Carla. This is Jathita. I just had a question that I saw in the chat that I thought was really interesting. And the question is there a benefit to getting dual certifications? So WeBank and NMSDC. Is there any benefit to doing that?
Yes. Arnita, do you want to take it or want me to take it? Or we both can take it? Because I'm like, yes.
Yes. So again, both organizations have not only national but also international accessibility and offering. So the fact that you have dual is going to be a major plus. Will that dual give you preferential treatment? No. Will that dual give you better visibility to other corporations outside of Disney? Absolutely. So if you have a dual certification, I would maximize that to the fullest extent possible.
That is so true, because in Arnice, you hit the nail on the head. It will not guarantee you as far as, hey, am I going to be first in line, or is it going to guarantee me opportunities? Not going to guarantee you opportunities, but it's going to create different networks for you to be able to showcase your talents. And I will always remember the last event that Enterprising Women of Color did at Disney. There was a lot of room in the room. There were business owners. And one thing that the panelists stressed, look at the person that's sitting next to you. That diverse business enterprise that's looking next to you might have a need for your product or service. And making sure that you're utilizing that network to make sure that you're building your bidding muscle. And making sure that, hey, you know what? Might not be time right now for me to be a part of a larger organization, but you know what? Just based on the network opportunities with WeBank, FMSDC from an NMSDC standpoint, but Florida State Minority Supplier Development Council, or whatever your supplier development council is, making sure that you're going to those different events. You know, yes, we all are sitting at home, and one thing that has forced us all to do is utilize technology. And being able to participate in webinars, being able to participate in matchmaking sessions when you're actually in the comforts of your home, and making sure that you are participating in those opportunities. You know, granted, I know we all are experiencing Zoom fatigue. Did not know it was a certain thing until I sat in a presentation and I was like, that is real. We are going to Zoom meetings after Zoom meetings, but making sure that you're leveraging the opportunity to be able to participate in events that might be showcased in Seattle or might be in Honolulu, and making sure that you're able to go to those different networking events in order to showcase your product or services that you have to offer. So you might have a WeBank certification, and then you also might have a City of Orlando certification, but definitely making sure that you're leveraging those different audiences to make sure to showcase your product and service.
Thank you, Carla. And I'll invite anyone to post your questions in the Q&A. We'll take a couple of more before we close out. And Carla, I just want to go back to what you were just explaining, because we have a question in the chat, and I want to reiterate, and I'm sure you will. They asked about past performance and is it necessary? And if you could just talk a little bit about the importance of past performance. And as you just stated, you know, it may not start with a Disney or a Coca-Cola, and that there are, you know, those people you can look next to you or up and down this chat stream and see people that you can collaborate with on projects to build that past performance.
And I think that past performance is so important. One thing that I mentioned earlier, and this is definitely something that me and Arnice have definitely experienced in the past, having a conversation with someone at a FMSDC event and literally having, I'm old school sometimes, when it comes to having business cards. And literally when we went on shutdown, I remember going to my office and I'm like, let me grab my business card holder. And literally during this time, looked at my business card holder and then was able to reach out to suppliers that I met at a Orange County Public School event like about 2 years ago. And we had been in contact, and I remember having a project that I was working on, like, hey, you know what, just checking in, how are things going? Are you interested in still doing work with Disney? And I think that's one thing that's really important, especially in this COVID environment. And the reason why I always make sure to ask that question, are you interested? Because you might have been interested 2 years ago, but then all of a sudden you had to pivot your business to another stream, and now that might not be your area of focus. So making sure to have those questions and asking, hey, are you still interested? And finding out, yes, I am still interested, and then reaching out to my stakeholder and saying, hey, you know what, we have a profile, you know what, let me get your profile sheet, and then let's go ahead and have that supplier fill out that information. And then once they were able to fill out the information, then they realized, hey, you know what, this person does fulfill the need that I'm actually looking for. So I can't state more and more, just looking at past performance, past relationships that you had, past engagements, and just making sure that you're still, doing those check-ins. It's a difference between following up, and then it's a difference between just being, I don't want to use the word aggravating, but sending a note every day saying, hey, is there opportunity? Is there opportunity? Because you definitely want to make sure that you're not burning your bridge. But I definitely respect as far as like the drive, definitely in this environment, but doing those check-ins maybe once a month or quarterly, just to say, hey, what's going on? Or, hey, you know what? I've updated my stuff and my information in the portal. Hey, just got this new contract in this area. So then that way, that kind of lets us know that we have to go in and, hey, let's go in based on the engagements that we had with supplier A or B, that they've strengthened their area in different areas that we want to make sure now that we can expose to our clients and stakeholders.
Another question that came up was, does the Walt Disney Company have a micro purchase benchmark? I'm not quite sure, so I'm going to try to interpret it that the business owner that asked this question should be relatively small, and do we actually do benchmarking of our purchases with micro, small companies? We do benchmarking of all of the marketplace a minimum of twice a year. And we also do a lot of benchmarking with our corporate colleagues that are part of the Fortune 100, just to get a clear understanding as to what the market will bear. If the person that asked that question could provide a little more clarification, I'd be more than happy to dive in a little bit more. Also, we received another question. What should new business owners expect when getting certified and trying to get a contract with Disney? Okay. The first thing that the new business owner needs to expect from Disney, we are not a company that's going to give you instant gratification. I wish we could, but typically we don't. So as a new business owner, first thing that's important when getting certified and approaching Disney is to do your research. Look at our annual operating plan. Look at, our SEC submittals. Understand what we do and the areas that we cover. And then from there, determine what is the area of your sweet spot, so that when you're interacting with either myself or with Ms. McKinney, at least we have a clear indication of what you're looking for, so we know how to best direct you. As far as trying to get a contract with Disney, it is a process. I wish I could say that it wasn't, but it is. But it's one in which we have a protocol by which we look and review suppliers. And one of the important areas is for the company to provide us with a statement of qualifications. And so when you contact either Ms. McKinney or myself, we will automatically email you back with what we need to see in the statement of qualifications, as well as other criteria that we look at, so that when you respond back to us, we have something that we can review and have further discussions with you. The next question, I believe this is the last one. Someone is from Hawaii. Aloha. I wasn't able to get online until now. Will you be able for questions afterwards? Again, Ms. McKinney and I, we will provide you with our contact information. And yes, you can email us with whatever questions or inquiries you may have.
Yes. And then it's important, make sure that you kind of do, like Arnie said, do your homework and make sure that you're actually going to that website and then updating information. So then that way, when you do reach out to us, we have a little bit more to understand about your organization. And Arnie, that's one thing that I remember we talked about before that I almost forgot. When you're looking at going into the portal, and Arnie said there's no instant gratification, a lot of suppliers that we've dealt with or worked with and built relationships with, they probably have been in business like 3 to 5 years at least. And so don't get discouraged. That was another reason why, if you are, you're just recently starting out, that you can make sure that you are networking in this area. So then that way you're building your bid muscle. So that's one thing why we want to stress on that, because I know someone sent in the chat, we want to make sure that we're creating an impact in the diverse community by building capacity and diverse vendors. And that's one thing that we want to make sure that we are building that capacity and making sure that you're utilizing your village in order to do that. And with that being said, Javeda, I'm going to turn it over to you because it's 2 o'clock and I'm 5 minutes over when I said I was going to turn it over.
Yes, you are, Carla. Yes, you are. But we appreciate it. Everything that you said, you and Arnice, it was just a wealth of information, and I appreciate it to both of you. Thank you so much. We got a lot of questions in the chat about whether or not this was recorded. It has been recorded. We will have it up on our mbda.gov website. It will be under our Enterprising Women of Color link. So next week, please be sure to visit us. We will have this webinar as well as our great webinar from last week will both be posted. So come back and check us out next week on our website. Second, we are going to do these opportunity brown bags much more consistently this year, virtually, of course. So shoot me an email and let me know if there's a company or a business that you want to learn more about opportunities that they may have. Send me an email, jhernandez@mbda.gov. Lastly, I want to invite you to connect with our Enterprising Women of Color business centers. As I mentioned, we have 5 across the country. We have 2 in the Washington, D.C. area. We have 1 in New Orleans, our WeBank South. We have 1 in Operation Hope, which operates out of several areas, including Atlanta. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have our YWCA in Oahu that operates out of Hawaii. So if you would like to get connected to any of those wonderful centers, please send me an email. Again, jhernandez@mbda.gov. I will connect you with those centers. They are on the ground and are here to help you get connected to corporations like Disney, help you get your certification that you need to be successful and competitive in these for these opportunities. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to sign off, but please stay connected with me, stay connected with Enterprising Women of Color. Stay safe, and until next time, thank you.